Rob, moving to rugby, a story that is gaining a lot of traction is Bismarck du Plessis' 4-week suspension. The general public discussed it in his sort of reaction on Saturday. But yeah, an ugly game of rugby between the Sharks and the Chiefs. What did you make of it?
Yeah, it was the first thing to say is really what a dreadful game it was. The one thing you've got to say in the Sharks' defence is that it's very unusual that a team is reduced to 13 men for the lion's share of the game. So the Sharks could be under, you could understand them ceasing to play rugby. They were simply playing sort of, a Klingon game, tackling, scrambling, and they did it for dear life. And you've got to give them an enormous amount of praise for that, because they ended up eking out a sort of an ugly, spiteful, but nevertheless very important victory over a very decent side. But I mean, the game will be remembered not only for the fact that there were 3 red cards in it, and you can debate the merits of all 3 cases however you like. But for me, the big flashpoint was the stupidity, frankly, of Bismarck du Plessis. The Sharks had been given the glorious benefit of, in the 15th minute, seeing his opposite number, Hicker Elliott, getting a red card. Now, whether you thought it was a sort of a yellow or red or whatever, the fact remains that the Chiefs were down to 14 men. At that moment, the captain, of all people, should have got his side together and said, guys, we can close this game out. We're 15 against 14. It's a golden opportunity for the Sharks to make sure we get the victory here and just play sensible rugby. But then all sense went out of the window 3 minutes later when Bismarck was on the ground and just lost his rag, which unfortunately has happened to him plenty of previous times. And this is going to be a big thing now. The debate around his suitability to be a captain, is going to come into deep question. So that meant that immediately leveled the score. In fact, almost even worse, because Bismarck is such a central pillar of that Sharks forward pack. They've now lost him not only for that game, but for the next 4 weeks, which could have dire implications for their title challenge, quite frankly.
Do you feel that sanction was fair? Do you think it should have been longer?
Yeah, I mean, there are people saying it could have been longer. He was contrite. I think he was necessarily contrite, and he pleaded guilty at a major rate of knots, which is often considered a little bit of a sort of a saving grace in the eyes of the citing commissioner. So he kind of did the right thing, and he's come out with a very humble statement of apology, which is obviously the correct thing to do. Look, he's a terrific rugby player, we all know that, but he does have a sort of a problem with that old fuse, and that's come to the roost again. So also from a Springbok point of view, remember that
it was interesting that they took his sort of track record into account and felt that one yellow card that was issued during the test match shouldn't have been a yellow card.
Yes. That's well, of course, but unfortunately what he's done now is he's blotted his copybook anew. He did have a little bit of a moral high ground after that incident against the All Blacks, which not only probably quite possibly robbed the Springboks of an upset win on the road, but he just does have this legacy, unfortunately, for sort of not necessarily sort of most brutish of foul play, but also sometimes just sort of niggle, and he's not shy to get sort of sometimes a little bit too involved with referees verbally, with opponents verbally. He's had a couple of spats, Dwayne Vermeulen, a little bit of a running battle with Victor Matfield.
Was shouting his mouth off at the ref too. I mean, that was...
Yeah, no, it went on and on. It wasn't a great advertisement for sort of, for any sort of, if you were sort of, little Johnny, your son was sitting watching the game with you, you would have been a little bit ashamed of some of the incidents that were there. If you were trying to sort of get him sort of interested in pursuing a fruitful rugby career. But, ugly game, ugly weather as well. Maybe that contributed to the players' mood. Yeah, also
he was next off. I mean, I wasn't too convinced by that red card. It did seem like Reinhard had a big part in sort of the spear movement of that tackle. Yeah, I don't know, but
it was kind of a gang tackle.
Steyn's another guy that it does have a history of getting sent to the bin.
Yeah, he's a single-minded individual. I don't think he's sort of he's not quite as kind of he doesn't have as much of a red mist as Bismarck has, but he's a big physical specimen. He does put his body around, quite a lot. Remember, he sort of roughed up Cheslin Colby, much of the time legally, frankly, at Newlands in the derby, not long before that. But he then did also get a yellow. So off he goes now for a red. I did feel it was justified. The more I looked at it in replay terms, the more I thought his body weight, his admittedly very strong body, was the one primarily responsible for the sort of the dump. And the player did go down at a very nasty angle. It was potentially, one of those that could cause a serious injury. So the Sharks have got major problems now because they've lost their first choice hooker. They've had some issues at centre. Paul Jordan is still not fit. So, Frans Steyn potentially now also coming out of the mix. We're just waiting to see what his sanction is. But they've got a major selection drama because they've also got issues with the whole controversy about the resting of players and the fact that they sort of flouted the recommendation, if you like, from Saru. And now they need their key figures, their remaining key figures, as much as ever. So a real pickle for the Sharks, and I'm afraid Bismarck du Plessis stands right at the middle of it.
But amazingly managing to win that game, and I think there was a game last year where they played 60 minutes.
The Crusaders, John Daisel, absolutely,
and won a game. So it just shows what they can do, I guess, with the right attitude.
Look, it's not something you want to do every week. The trouble is, I always think that there's a little bit of a toll down the line, because when you're forced into that sort of murderous level of defence, the physical toll is quite something in a competition that is already physically taxing. So you might find for the next couple of games, a lot of the Sharks players who were suddenly forced into scrambling, are going to be quite knackered for the next couple of games. So they're really going to have to eke out their next couple of games, which are, I think, home to the Force and then the Crusaders. Crusaders especially will be a hard nut to crack.